trains are heavy, like comically heavy. 100 freight cars at 100 tons each, all behind one locomotive. That locomotive weighs less than 1% of the total load. So how does it pull all of that without the wheels just spinning? The answer is one of the coolest physics loopholes ever. That's the part that breaks people's brains. A locomotive weighing 420,000 pounds is dragging something that weighs 100 times more than itself. Your truck can't do that. Your car can't do it. Even the biggest construction equipment on Earth, the stuff they use to build skyscrapers, can't do that. So what makes a locomotive different? Why does it work at all? The answer involves a physics cheat code, a mechanical trick that almost feels like cheating, and a material combination so perfectly matched it makes everything else look stupid. And the craziest part is that most people, even people who love trains, can't explain why it actually works. The genius of steel on steel. Here's where it starts getting good. Every vehicle on Earth has to fight rolling resistance. Rolling resistance is the energy wasted just keeping the wheels turning. Your car has rubber tires on asphalt. Those tires squish and deform with every rotation, and that deformation eats energy like crazy. The rolling resistance coefficient for truck tires on asphalt is around 0.008. That means for every 1,000 pounds of weight, you waste 8 pounds of force just fighting the road. Now, look at trains. Steel wheels on steel rails have a rolling resistance coefficient of 0.001 to 0.002. That's 4 to 8 times less resistance. I need you to sit with that number for a second because it changes everything. The contact patch where a steel train wheel meets the rail is about the size of a dime. One tiny little spot, maybe half a square inch, supporting tens of thousands of pounds. A single truck tire has a footprint approaching 1 square foot. That's roughly 200 times more contact area. And here's the wild part. More contact area means more energy wasted. The truck tire is squishing, deforming, heating up, flexing with every single rotation. The steel wheel barely flexes at all. It just rolls. Clean, efficient, almost frictionless forward motion. This is why trains achieve 477 to 528 ton-miles per gallon of diesel fuel. Trucks manage 68 to 145 tons per gallon. Trains are 3 to 4 times more fuel efficient at moving heavy stuff, and the reason is literally just the wheels, the material, the contact patch. That's it. Everything else is engineering on top of that one beautiful advantage. The entire American freight rail system basically exists because somebody looked at a steel wheel on a steel rail and said, yeah, that's good enough. And it was. It really was. One car at a time. Okay, so you've got this incredibly efficient rolling system, but there's still a massive problem. Getting 10,000 tons of steel and cargo to start moving from a dead stop. Static friction is a pain. It takes way more force to get something moving than it does to keep it moving. If a locomotive had to overcome the static friction of all 100 cars simultaneously, the force required would snap every coupler on the train like breadsticks. And this is where the most underrated trick in railroading comes in. Every coupler connecting one freight car to the next has about 6 inches of free play built into it. This is called slack. The shock-absorbing device inside the coupler is called a draft gear. When the train's sitting still, all those couplers are loose. There's roughly 6 inches of dead space between every single car. On a 100-car train, that adds up to about 50 feet of total slack. 50 feet of nothing. 50 feet of potential energy just waiting to be used. Here's how the engineer uses it. Before starting, they back the locomotive up, slowly. This compresses the entire train, pushing all those couplers together, bunching every car tight against the one behind it. Now the locomotive sits at the front of a fully compressed consist with 50 feet of space between itself and the tension point of the first car. Then the engineer throttles forward. The locomotive moves ahead and picks up the first car, just the first one. Draft gear stretches, slack runs out, and car number 1 starts rolling. But car number 2 is still sitting there, still compressed against car 3. Now the momentum of the locomotive plus car 1 starts stretching the coupler to car 2. Car 2 starts moving, then car 3, then 4. The whole train comes alive in a wave, one car at a time, front to back, like a zipper opening in slow motion. That's obviously genius, and I can't stress this enough. Instead of needing 200,000 pounds of force to overcome the static friction of 100 cars at once, the locomotive only needs to overcome the static friction of one car at a time. That's maybe 2,000 to 3,000 pounds per car. The impossible force gets distributed across time instead of applied all at once. It's the same total energy, but spread out over 30 seconds instead of one instant. Draft gear is the single most unappreciated piece of engineering in the entire railroad industry. Without it, trains as we know them couldn't exist. The grip game. So your wheels are rolling, your train's moving, but you still need grip. You need the locomotive wheels to push against the rail without spinning. This is adhesion, and it's the ceiling on everything a locomotive can do. The adhesion coefficient between a steel wheel and a dry steel rail is typically 0.25 to 0.40. That means a locomotive can pull with a force equal to 25 to 40% of its own weight before the wheels start spinning. An EMD SD70 ACE, one of the most common freight locomotives in America, weighs 420,000 to 432,000 pounds. At an adhesion coefficient of around 0.35, it can produce a starting tractive effort of 189,000 to 200,000 pounds. That's almost half its body weight converted directly into pulling force. Imagine doing a deadlift where the barbell weighs almost as much as you do, except you're doing it with your feet on polished metal. That's what a locomotive does every time it starts a train, and it does it all day, every day, for decades. But here's where physics gives you a bonus. When the locomotive starts pulling hard on the coupler sits about 30 inches above the rail while the axles sit at rail level. That height difference creates a torque, a twisting force that shifts weight from the front wheels onto the rear driving wheels. The harder the locomotive pulls, the more weight transfers to the back, and more weight means more adhesion. The locomotive literally gets grippier the harder it works. It's a self-reinforcing cycle built into the geometry of the machine. Nobody had to program this. Nobody had to invent a special system. It's just physics doing its thing when things get slippery. Rain, oil, crushed leaves, morning dew. All of these destroy adhesion. Wet rails can drop the coefficient to 0.10 or 0.20, cutting pulling power in half or worse. Railroads have been fighting this since day one. The primary weapon is sand. Locomotives carry hoppers full of it on board. When the engineer needs grip, the locomotive drops sand directly onto the rails just ahead of the driving wheels. The sand creates micro-roughness, tiny grip points that spike the friction coefficient back up above 0.20. It's basically the train equivalent of throwing sand on an icy parking lot. Simple, crude, but effective. Engineers have been doing this for over 100 years and nothing has replaced it because nothing works better. Modern locomotives also have computerized wheel slip detection. Sensors monitor every wheel in real time. The moment one wheel starts spinning faster than the others, the computer cuts power to that axle within 10 milliseconds and redistributes it to the wheels that still have grip. 10 milliseconds. It's faster than you can blink. The locomotive is constantly dancing on the edge of adhesion, applying maximum force without crossing the line into uncontrolled wheel spin. It's like cruise control for grip. The engineer doesn't have to think about it. The system handles adhesion management automatically, which means the crew can focus on signals, track conditions, and not running into anything. Fallen leaves in autumn are actually one of the worst enemies of adhesion in the eastern United States. The leaves get crushed into a slippery paste on the rails, and the friction coefficient plummets. Railroads in Appalachia deal with this every October and November, and some lines actually schedule extra sanding runs before heavy freight moves through leaf country. The engine that's not an engine. Here's something that surprises people. The diesel engine in a locomotive doesn't drive the wheels at all. The diesel engine drives a generator. That generator produces electricity, and that electricity powers individual traction motors mounted directly on each axle. The locomotive is basically a rolling power plant. This matters because electric motors deliver maximum torque at zero speed. The moment you flip the switch, full pulling power is available instantly. Try doing that with a manual transmission. You'd burn the clutch out in about 3 seconds flat. The diesel-electric system also means the diesel engine can run at its most efficient speed regardless of how fast the train is going. At 10 miles per hour, a 4,300 horsepower SD70 ACE produces about 161,000 pounds of tractive effort. At 50 miles per hour, it produces about 32,000 pounds. The horsepower stays the same, the force just shifts from pulling power to speed as the train accelerates. No gear changes, no clutch, no transmission, just smooth, continuous power delivery. Your car needs a whole transmission with 6 or more gears just to get you to highway speed. The Locomotive does the same thing with electricity and 0 mechanical gear changes. It's genuinely elegant engineering, kind of stuff that makes you wonder why we even bother with transmissions in anything. The AC revolution. For decades, locomotives used DC traction motors. They worked fine, but they had limitations. The brushes inside the motors physically rubbed against a spinning commutator, creating friction, wear, and heat. Sometimes they caught fire. I'm not kidding. DC traction motor fires were a regular maintenance headache for railroads. And the adhesion control was crude at best, basically just reducing power to the whole locomotive when any wheel slipped. Then, in 1993, 2 manufacturers dropped game changers simultaneously. GE released the AC 4400CW and EMD released the SD70 Mac, both using AC induction motors with computerized inverters. AC traction boosted adhesion by 20 to 30% compared to DC. The computer controlled torque on each motor independently, adjusting hundreds of times per second, keeping every wheel at peak adhesion without spinning. The result was staggering. 3 AC locomotives could now do the work of 5 DC units on heavy coal trains. BNSF saw the math and immediately ordered hundreds. They cut their locomotive needs by 40% on Powder River Basin coal operations alone. DC locomotives basically became obsolete overnight. It was the biggest leap in freight railroad technology since the switch from steam to diesel. Imagine if Tesla suddenly figured out how to make cars go 40% further on the same battery. That's the scale of what AC traction did to the railroad industry, and it happened in the 90s, when most people were worried about dial-up internet speeds and Tamagotchis. Distributed power in the modern train. You know how in the old days every locomotive was up front like a conga line? That created massive stress on the couplers near the lead engines. The AAR Type E coupler maxes out at 750,000 pounds of force, and long heavy trains were getting dangerously close to that limit. So, railroads started spreading locomotives throughout the train. A big freight might run with 4 up front, 2 in the middle, and 3 at the rear, all controlled by radio from the lead unit. This is distributed power, and it changed how long trains can be. Instead of one massive pull from the front, you have multiple pushes and pulls distributed along the entire length. Coupler forces stay manageable. Each section of the train has its own locomotive handling its share of the work. Think of it like a tug-of-war where instead of everybody pulling from one end, you have people pulling from 3 different spots on the rope. Same total force, way less stress on any single point. Some modern trains stretch over 2 miles long with over 200 cars. You couldn't run a train that long without distributed power. Couplers would rip apart before you made it out of the yard. The downhill problem. Getting a train moving is hard. Stopping one is terrifying. A 10,000-ton train rolling at 50 miles per hour has an absurd amount of kinetic energy stored up. If you relied only on mechanical brakes, the brake shoes would overheat, warp, and possibly catch fire within minutes. This is where dynamic braking saves the day. The traction motors flip their function. Instead of converting electricity into motion, they convert motion back into electricity. The wheels turn the motors generate current, and that current gets dissipated as heat through resistor grids mounted on the locomotive roof. On a long mountain descent, the locomotive in full dynamic braking can dissipate enough heat to warm a small building. You can actually see the heat shimmering off the top of locomotives on long mountain passes. Without dynamic braking, the engineer would have to ride the air brakes for miles, and the heat buildup would warp the brake shoes, damage the wheels, and in extreme cases actually start fires. It's not an exaggeration. Before dynamic braking was widespread, runaway trains on mountain grades were a real and terrifying thing. Newer designs like the Wabtec FLX drive take it further. The FLX drive has a 7 megawatt-hour battery and 3.2 megawatts of traction power, roughly 4,290 horsepower equivalent. Instead of wasting that braking energy as heat, it stores it in batteries for later use. Early tests showed double-digit percentage reductions in fuel consumption, and these hybrid units are already in service with Union Pacific, Canadian National, and several mining operations. From steam to silicon, the evolution of pulling power in America is wild, and it happened faster than most people realize. The Union Pacific Big Boy from 1941 weighed 1.2 million pounds fully loaded, and it produced 135,375 pounds of starting tractive effort running on 300 psi boiler pressure. It was the strongest thing on rails, hauling 3,500 tons over the Wasatch Mountains. This thing was so massive that it needed a special articulated frame just to get around curves. The boiler was the size of a studio apartment, but it burned coal by the trainload, needing water stops every 50 to 100 miles, and required an entire crew just to keep the fire going. You basically needed a small village of workers just to keep one big boy operational. It was awesome and completely impractical at the same time. Diesel killed steam by 1960. Cleaner, more reliable, way less maintenance. A diesel locomotive could run for days without refueling. A steam locomotive needed water stops every 50 to 100 miles. It was like comparing a modern smartphone to a rotary phone. Both make calls, one is just absurdly better at everything else. Then AC traction killed DC in the 1990s. Better adhesion, fewer moving parts, less maintenance, more pulling power. And now hybrid battery systems are starting to eat into pure diesel territory. Each generation pulled more weight with fewer locomotives, less fuel, and smaller crews. A modern two-person crew moves 10,000 tons the same distance that took 200 workers with steam. That's a productivity increase so massive it would make any Silicon Valley startup weep with envy. Trains versus everything else. A Peterbilt semi-truck maxes out at 80,000 pounds gross weight. One driver, one truck, maybe 20 tons of cargo. The fuel efficiency works out to about 68 to 145 ton miles per gallon. A single train crew of 2 people moves 10,000 tons or more at 477 to 528 ton miles per gallon. That cost works out to roughly 1 cent per ton mile by rail. 1 cent per ton per mile. Let that marinate for a second. Try matching that with anything else. You can't. Airplanes cost thousands per hour. Trucks burn through fuel fighting rubber on asphalt. Barges are efficient but slow and limited to waterways. A single freight train replaces roughly 300 trucks on the highway. 300. That's an entire fleet of trucks, drivers, fuel stops, tire changes, and highway wear, all replaced by 2 people sitting in a cab eating sandwiches while a computer handles the adhesion. Rail wins at heavy hauling, and it's never going to be close.